The world is watching in absolute shock today as the thin veil of security in the Middle East finally shatters for the entire world to see. Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has built his entire legacy on being the protector of his nation, is now witnessing the slow-motion collapse of his own authority. It's not just a political setback, it's a terminal decline. Reports are flooding in that reveal a level of desperation inside the Israeli cabinet that even the most loyal analysts are struggling to spin. The truth is simple: Netanyahu knows his time is running out. We aren't just talking about a border skirmish anymore. We are talking about an escalation that has entered survival mode. While the government tries to project an image of absolute control, the reality on the ground is a high-stakes gamble. Intelligence reports and leaked documents suggest that the internal pressure is mounting to a breaking point. Just as we've seen the Kremlin butchering its own army to survive, the cracks in the leadership are now impossible to hide. The situation reached a fever pitch as Iranian jets, specifically their high-speed interceptors, began aggressive maneuvers that have sent shockwaves through the region. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate move to expose a bluff. Netanyahu wanted the world to see him as bold, but instead, the world is seeing a man boxed in by his own mistakes. Every provocation makes the administration look smaller, not larger, and that's a truth that can no longer be escaped. But the real story is even clearer. Ordinary people are paying the price for these choices. The economy is struggling, and the constant state of conflict drains resources at a rate that simply cannot be sustained. Netanyahu promised stability, but he has delivered endless tension and isolation. He lashes out abroad because at home, the cracks are widening. He wants his people to think he is still feared, still commanding attention on the world stage. But you know the truth. If he were secure, he wouldn't need stunts like this. This is the beginning of the end. Not because one attack alone can topple him, but because moments like this show how fragile his position really is. He is running out of options, the military is being stretched past its limits, and his circle of allies is shrinking. The warrior mindset that was once respected has been replaced by acts of panic and desperation. Under President Trump, this kind of reckless escalation would never have reached this point. Under his leadership, American strength was clear and foreign policy was tough, ensuring that adversaries acted with caution. But under the current era of weakness, limits are being tested and loopholes are being exploited. The return of peace through strength is the only way to stop this downward spiral. The momentum has shifted, the world is watching, and the ultimate endgame is closer than anyone dared to imagine. Netanyahu has realized that his power, isn't growing, it's collapsing. The rot isn't just in the political leadership, it's in the very foundation of the war machine. While the headlines focus on the jets in the sky, a different kind of crisis is unfolding on the ground. We are seeing a military that was once hailed as one of the most advanced in the world enter what can only be described as a survival mode. Just like the Russian military is currently butchering its own arsenal, stripping main guns and turrets off of Cold War-era tanks just to keep their equipment functional, we are starting to see the same signs of hardware exhaustion and desperation in this theatre. The statistics are staggering. You cannot run a high-intensity war forever without hitting a wall. Reports from intelligence and leaked logistics documents confirm that the hardware meltdown is real. When you see a modern force having to scavenge parts or rely on outdated systems because their primary equipment has been destroyed at historic rates, you aren't looking at a force that is winning. You are looking at a regime that is panicking. But it's not just about the metal, it's about the men. In a shocking parallel to the recruitment failures we've seen in Europe, where Berlin is struggling to find enough volunteers to man its defences, the internal spirit of the Israeli military is being tested like never before. The warrior mindset is being replaced by fatigue and internal friction. People are realizing that the permanent state of conflict promised by Netanyahu isn't a strategy for victory, it's a recipe for national exhaustion. The desperation in the cabinet is now mirroring the desperation we see in Moscow. Just as Putin is welding mismatched parts onto rusted hulls to keep his units armed, the leadership in Jerusalem is looking for any plan B to keep their operations from stalling. They are trying to trade lives for time, hoping the world will get tired of the conflict before their resources run completely dry. Under the peace through strength doctrine of President Trump, this kind of systemic rot was kept in check. He understood that you can't build a warrior culture with empty promises. You need clear, tough foreign policy that ensures your enemies act with caution. Under his leadership, American strength was an anchor of stability. But now, under a different era of weakness, we see adversaries testing every limit and exploiting every loophole. The arteries of the war machine are bleeding, and the heart of the leadership is failing to pump. Putin is watching, Iran is watching, and the elites know their fortunes are shrinking, while ordinary families pay the price. The scrapyard superpower mentality has moved from the plains of Ukraine to the deserts of the Middle East. When a leader starts butchering his own reputation and his own military just to survive another month in office, the endgame is no longer a question of if, it is a question of when. The truth is, catching up to the propaganda. Netanyahu knows that once the spare parts and the public's patience run out, his hold on power dies with it. While the internal spirit of the military is being tested, the international stakes have reached a level of tension that the world has not seen in decades. This isn't just about a local conflict anymore. It is about a direct, high-speed collision course between the scrapyard superpower proxies and a newly unified Western front. As Netanyahu's arteries of domestic support bleed out, he is finding that the days of simple, one-sided military dominance are over. We are witnessing a massive shift in the rules of engagement. In a closed-door meeting in Moscow that mirrors the pressure being applied to Jerusalem, diplomats from Britain, France, and Germany have delivered a message that is as sharp as a bayonet. The era of warnings is over. Reports confirm that European officials have warned their counterparts that further incursions into NATO airspace, including the 12-minute supersonic violation of Estonian airspace by Russian MiG-31s, will no longer be tolerated. The next step isn't a diplomatic letter. It's the sound of NATO jets shooting down anything that crosses the line with lethal force. This is the return of the warrior mindset that the media hates to admit. It is the realization that you cannot negotiate with a bully who only understands the language of absolute power. President Trump has been the primary architect of this peace through strength doctrine, publicly stating that NATO should shoot down any aircraft that violates Allied territory. He understands that under the previous administration's weakness, adversaries felt emboldened to exploit every loophole and test every limit. But now, as the US supports its allies with a combination of weapons, funding, and intelligence, the message is clear. The line has been drawn in the sand. Netanyahu is caught in the middle of this global shift. While he tries to project an image of quick and decisive action, the reality of a broader war with Iran, now involving hundreds of missiles and drones targeting neighboring countries, has left his administration cornered. The Iranian regime is doubling down, claiming that the West's support for its enemies constitutes an overt war by proxy. Just as we saw Putin's jets test Estonia, we are now seeing a regional standoff where one wrong move could result in a total catastrophe. The hardware meltdown we've seen in Russia is starting to have a choking effect here as well. Despite having state-of-the-art systems, the cost of defense is becoming an asymmetrical nightmare. Using a multi-million-dollar Patriot missile to bring down a cheap drone is not a sustainable strategy in an endless war. Netanyahu knows that his illusion of dominance is being challenged by a strategy designed to surprise and overwhelm. While the diplomatic world gasps at the lethal force warnings from NATO, the physical reality of Netanyahu's gamble is being written in fire and twisted metal deep inside the scrapyard superpower of the Middle East. We are witnessing a monumental shift in the initiative. Just as Ukraine has systematically ignited the Russian military-industrial base, we are seeing the arteries of the Iranian war machine being severed in real time. This isn't just about winning a battle, it's about a total hardware meltdown that the regime cannot hide. The world just witnessed a series of vivid demonstrations that the so-called impenetrable defenses of Tehran are a hollow shell. In a surgical operation codenamed Rising Lion, over 200 fighter jets struck more than 100 strategic targets across the country, hitting the very hubs that fuel Iran's military aggression. We aren't just talking about military bases, we are talking about the industrial gut of the regime. Strikes have pounded the solid fuel production factories at Parchin, Qojir, and Sharud, the crown jewels of Iran's missile program. By hitting these specific facilities, the offensive is going after the arteries that allow Iran to replace its losses. Reports confirm the destruction of critical planetary mixers, specialized industrial machines used to create solid missile propellant. Without these mixers, Iran's ability to replenish its heavy ballistic missile stockpile is effectively frozen. The regime is now in a survival mode, desperately trying to smuggle in parts from the Chinese supply chain, only to have those shipments intercepted in the Indian Ocean by elite special forces. This is the hardware meltdown in its most pure form. Putin is butchering his own tanks to stay in the fight, and now Tehran is facing a similar humiliation. Their much-hyped S-300 and S-400 air defense batteries, the systems they bragged would shield them from the West, are now reported as largely non-functional. In the opening hours of the conflict, these sophisticated radars were sniped by loitering munitions and electronic warfare, leaving the skies over Tehran wide open. Netanyahu knows that this kind of industrial decapitation is the only way to force a bully to the table. This is the warrior mindset in action, the realization that you don't just fight the soldier, you destroy the factory that arms him. President Trump has been briefed on this deteriorating circumstance for the regime, and it is why he has dramatically shifted his leverage toward a peace deal on favorable terms. He understands that under a leader who values peace through strength, global adversaries act with caution because they know their arteries can be severed at any moment. The illusion of an unstoppable regional power is burning. Iran is running out of hardware, running out of money, and running out of time. As the factories at Parchin smolder and the elite IRGC units watch their air defenses collapse, the question isn't if the regime will face a meltdown, it's how much of their arsenal will be left when the dust finally settles. The dust is finally beginning to settle over the ruins of Tehran, and as the smoke clears, the world is witnessing the most significant geopolitical earthquake of the 21st century. This is no longer a theoretical exercise or a dangerous gamble. The scrapyard superpower has met its match, and the arteries of the Iranian regime have been completely severed. We are now in the final hours of the endgame, where the illusion of an unstoppable theocratic power has been replaced by the cold reality of a leadership in absolute ruin. The world was stunned when the news broke. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been eliminated. In a series of high-precision strikes codenamed Operation Roaring Lion, Israeli and American forces didn't just target military depots, they went for the heart of the command and control apparatus. Along with Khamenei, dozens of senior IRGC commanders and government officials were neutralized in the first wave of strikes, leaving the regime in a state of total, paralyzed chaos. This is the hardware meltdown taken to its logical terminal conclusion. While Netanyahu and President Trump projected a warrior mindset, the Iranian leadership was caught completely by surprise. For decades, the regime relied on an aura of fear to maintain power both at home and abroad. Today, that aura is gone. The S-300 and S-400 air defense batteries, once bragged about as the shield of the revolution, were butchered in the opening hours, leaving the skies over major Iranian cities entirely under the control of Allied F-35s. The Iranian response has been extensive, but it smells of panic. Hundreds of drones and missiles were launched not just at Israel and US bases, but at neighboring Arab states including Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE. But this scorched earth strategy has backfired. Instead of splitting the region, it has unified nearly every Gulf nation against Tehran. The 22-nation Arab League has officially condemned the attacks as a blatant violation of sovereignty, effectively isolating the regime as it takes its final, dying breaths. Netanyahu, a leader who was promised for 40 years to smite the terror regime hip and thigh, is now standing at the apex of his career. By aligning with the peace through strength doctrine of President Trump, he has delivered what many thought was impossible, the crushing blow to his greatest existential threat. Trump himself has declared that the goal of the operation, to destroy Iran's nuclear and military capabilities, is being successfully realized, and that the path to a new era of stability is now open. The question now is what happens to the pieces of the scrapyard superpower. Inside Iran, the people are taking their destiny into their own hands. With massive protests spreading to over 100 cities, they have seen the arteries of their oppressors burn, and they are ready for the truth. The warrior mindset has returned, the bully has been defeated, and the endgame is finally here. The world has changed forever, and we will be here on the front lines to bring you the truth as it happens. Subscribe now and don't miss a second of history in the making.